I'm a senior at Randolph College in Lynchburg, Virginia, and a dual major in physics and math. All right. My advisors are Jack Gross and Dr. Katrin Shank, neither of which, unfortunately, could be here today. Jack was injured, and Dr. Shank, it turns out, has pneumonia. But fortunately, neither of those affected me in coming here, although I certainly miss them. My project was funded by the 2013 Randolph College Summer Research Program. I was fortunate enough to be able to attempt to observe occultations during said program. Next slide, please. David, you'll hear me yet? I'm going to talk about the Winfrey Observatory, the facility that I use for occultation observations. Some of the observations I've done, some problems I've encountered, some solutions that I have in mind, and the possibility of Iota extending its reach to other undergraduate institutions like mine. Next slide, please. The Winfrey Observatory has a single telescope, a 14-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain, which you see here in the top picture. It's on the Randolph College campus itself, so from any location on campus, I can walk for less than 5 minutes and go to the observatory whenever I want. I have the keys in my pocket right now, so I could go there if I were there. It's not used for any other research, and it hasn't been used for any other research since I got to the college 3 years ago. So it's certainly an underused observatory in that sense. The only research being done there is my occultation research. Next slide, please. One of the positive results that I got, the first one I got, was the 231 Vin de Bona occultation. The skies were clear, as they never are. Star was merely magnitude 10, which, with the 14-inch telescope that we have, is easily seen. It was the only occultation of Vin de Bona observed that night, and it's one of only 3 occultations of this asteroid ever observed, as far as I know. You can see here a diagram from Occult displaying my result, marked number 3, the bottom line, and the impact that it had on what we think about Vin de Bona's location. As you can see, it's off perhaps about 60 kilometers from where the asteroid should have been. And I thought this was an interesting result because I thought, naively of course, as one who hasn't done occultation research before this, that our predictions were perfect and that we knew exactly where everything was. Next slide, please. Here I have a graph of the miss from 1679 Nevanlina, which was the main point for a colleague of mine, Chris Statz, who did his senior research with me for the spring semester of 2013. I also had my second success just this week with 788 Hohensteina. Fortunately, the cloud front didn't quite reach me in time. I had about 5 or 10 more minutes. I'll also talk about the 211 Isolde occultation that we missed with Steve Connard visiting. He contacted the Winfrey Observatory in Randolph College to see if we would do this event. And of course, as Steve said, no one said no to him yet. So we agreed, and he was gracious enough to come down, show us how to do occultation research, and then we did it with him. And while it was a miss, it was valuable in showing me exactly what I needed to do in the future. And of course, there are numerous other occultations that I attempted, but then spotted clouds in the sky several hours before, so I didn't go out and observe them. Next slide, please. One of the major problems that I have with occultation timing, aside from clouds, which is the case for all astronomy, is light pollution, which is also the case for all astronomy. The Winfrey Observatory is located just north of Lynchburg at the cross, near the middle of the picture, the large cross. And while it's not nearly as much light pollution as is present here in College Park, it's still significant. And the fact that Lynchburg is south of us only makes it worse, because most asteroids are in the main belt near the ecliptic, and so most occultations happen towards the south. Another problem we've been having is data transfer. With the analog camcorder that we're using, when we digitize the data, sometimes some of the data seems like it's lost. So I can see a star clearly on this little screen on my camcorder, but when I put it into my big computer screen that's 12 or 13 inches across on the diagonal, I can't see the star at all. And although it's never happened for an event which I thought would be positive, it worries me that it might come up again one day. Another problem which we have is that our 14-inch telescope is a bit degraded. It's almost as old as I am. It's 20 years old. So over those 20 years, it's become a bit rusty. Quite literally, the back of the mirror has become a bit rusty. And although the Blue Ridge Astronomy Club attempted to clean the mirror, they could not quite get everything off of it, as you might imagine. Next slide, please. Some potential solutions to the problems that I've had can mainly be found in mobile observation capabilities. With a mere 6-inch scope and access to some of the darkest skies in the mid-Atlantic, only 2 hours away from the college, we can obtain results just as good as those that we would get with the Winfrey scope. Also, a camera with an HDMI output or an SD card slot so that I could transfer video directly to my computer without putting it through a Mac first, because my computer doesn't happen to have a FireWire port on it, would help, I think, with the potential data loss. I think that some of the data may also be lost in transit between the Mac that I use to get the video directly from the camera from said Mac to my PC. Next slide, please. And now, perhaps for some of the most interesting parts of this presentation, I think, and that's how can Iota extend its reach to other small undergraduate colleges with observatories that have large telescopes or not so large telescopes that are just sitting there, unused. I became interested in asteroid occultations because I was looking for a research project that I could do. One hears, at least I hear, about all the research that's being done on the Hubble Space Telescope and with other space telescopes and large telescopes on the ground, which we as undergraduate college students at small liberal arts colleges do not have access to at all. But asteroid occultation research is accessible. It's accessible to the tune of less than $2,000, which happens to be the amount of money that I am guaranteed in a grant at the college. So had I only recently learned about occultation research, I could have used said grant to obtain all the supplies that I would need for the research and then do it with no cost to me at all. And occultation research can be an effective tool for promoting inquiry and simply getting the word out about astronomy. Randolph College has a single astronomy class, so there isn't much of an astronomy program there, but I could take said astronomy class out for an occultation observation and show them the process, and I think they would understand it because, as Dr. Dunham explained earlier today, it's quite simple. Thank you all for listening, and I'd like to especially thank Steve Connard for all the help that he's given me, and for his trip to Virginia and his help in analyzing data, as well as being a resource for me and a connection to Iota for me. Thank you. Are there any questions? Dr. Schenk does have a degree in theoretical astrophysics from Cornell University, so she is an astronomer in a sense, but that is no longer her primary research. Her primary research nowadays is actually investigating mice to see, currently, to see if their calls have any meaning. Quite a change. Any more questions? Yes. Yes, I have. I noticed, as a matter of fact, you said that the occultation came a few seconds late. It was late for me too. It was about 4 or 5 seconds late. I think that both path offset and temporal offsets have a considerable effect. I mean, it's just the direction in the orbit that we're talking about, whether the orbital plane is changing or whether the asteroids traveled a certain distance in its orbit. Am I correct on this, Dr. Dunham? Okay. Yes, it was about 10 seconds long, so the 5-second delay is right. It's half a diameter, so. I record to Canon ZR85, I believe it is, and then I take that data, put it into a Mac, use iMovie to shrink the size of the film so that my computer, which doesn't have much memory on it left, can handle it, and then Most likely there's compression going on. Okay. That's why I'm here. Oh, yes. Oh, goodness. Steve probably remembers this better than I do, but what I remember is that he wanted a scope to use, and we were more than willing to let him use it because we weren't doing anything with it. It's such a shame to see the 14-inch telescope being unused for good research. So all I think that needs to be done is reach out to observatories that you think may not be being used. And I think that any caretaker of said observatory would be more than willing to not only give you the time, but should you be willing to train said caretaker, they may use the observatory for occultations in the future. Yes. Yes. It is interesting work. I agree. Yes, they're actually, I just got word from an incoming freshman who is interested in possibly doing research at the observatory. So I think he'll be doing occultation research. Yes. I will say that go-to telescopes are helpful, especially when your screen is very small. Yes.
Hart, Ted Swift said he'd like to talk about it too.
Oh, I guess that I'm up next with me. Yes.